Writing a book and getting it published is quite an undertaking. My next guest felt so strongly about John Dean Park that he researched and published this book. Jarrett Teague, welcome.
Well, it's good to be here. Yeah.
This is quite an undertaking. What happened to make you feel that you felt you had to write a book on John Dean Park?
I would say it was the first photo that Edward Island gave me, and that was of John Dean's cabin.
Oh,
and,
yes.
It was a 1921 picture, and he had about 15 people standing around the edges of the cabin, and I just couldn't believe that in 1921 that was in John Dean Park, and so I was 13 at the time. This is when the Friends of John Dean first started, and we started building the original trails, the perimeter loop trails around the park. And I just gained a small interest in the park's history, and that led to a gradual building of a collection of photos. I have 61 now, and so it took me 6 months to write the book, and so I spent every night compiling and researching and typing, but really years and years of gathering.
When did it consciously become a book? You started collecting photos, you were interested. Do you have any idea when it actually grew into being an idea for a book?
Yeah, it would have been last October when I bought my computer. So I spent $3,000 and bought the computer and typed out my first couple paragraphs were literally copying the Friends of John Dean newsletter, one that came out about 5 years ago.
I see.
Barrett Monfort, who donated 160 acres to the park. Of course, that chapter's grown and changed tremendously as I learned more and found out what really happened.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what is the history? For those who aren't familiar with John Dean Park, where is it and what's its history?
Well, John Dean Park is on the summit of Mount Newton, and Mount Newton is in the middle of the Saanich Peninsula.
Okay.
It's kind of by the airport.
And that's the Dean Park residential district, and whatever is on the lower
the
lower district, and it's the top.
Yeah, it's the forested mountain where the radar towers. And John Dean purchased that land in 1909 as part of a Crown grant, and donated it to the people of British Columbia in 1921. He continued to live on a small section of that land. It was 18 acres until he died, and so he kind of gave two sections of land. The first one was about 80 acres in 21, and in 36 it was the remaining 18 acres.
Which included his cabin and where he had been living.
And the Forest Service, who maintained the park up until 46, lived in his cabin, the park ranger, warden.
Oh,
and so the cabin was burned in 57 because it became rotten and it needed too much repair.
So it was unsafe.
Yeah, and hippies started to move in, and so, but now you can't even find it. All that's left now is ivy. There's ivy all over the ground and growing up trees. But the trees are this big. They're 40 years old. And,
wow.
Yeah. So it's a fun mountain, and it became obvious to me that it was Edward Island who started the Friends of John Dean Park, or me, who know most about the park. And but by far it was Ito who got me inspired and who led me to a lot of my research sources. He knows a lot of the old timers, a lot of the people who gave me a lot of the photos.
Yeah,
and,
well, he's a long-standing community resident and counselor and all sorts of things. He's been involved a long
jack
time.
of all hobbies. Yeah.
Sure, sure.
But yeah, it was a fun project, and I think now that the book's finished, I'm almost bored at night because I used to go home and literally spend 2 hours just poking at it and getting this idea and making this paragraph or doing this picture page.
Ah, okay.
So
now, in all of these, you said you had 61 pictures. Are they virtually all here?
yes, they're all in there.
Okay.
There's 61 in the book, and I probably have about 75. But you know, some of them didn't.
Some of them aren't copyable or
didn't mean anything.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. Now I understand John Dean Park is threatened in some way right now.
Well, it's a provincial park. It's the 75th anniversary, 1921 to 1996. 6 years ago, or 7, the Socreds identified 46 provincial parks, which they felt didn't meet provincial importance, and John Dean accidentally was thrown in that package.
Didn't meet provincial importance.
Or
okay.
significance, yeah. The other 45 parks that have been downloaded already, I would agree with. Things like Gulf View Picnic Site on East Saanich Road. These little backyard parks. Get rid of them, download them, give them to the municipalities where they belong. But John Dean has too much provincial history. It has old-growth forest. It has all the values and importance that a provincial park needs. So yeah, the future is threatened. They want to download it to the CRD. The local First Nations want a bit of, they want 30% say on what goes on in the park because of the land claim.
Right.
But the Friends of John Dean don't want the park downloaded because we want it to remain under the Provincial Parks Act. And that'll give us the protection of the Parks Act, the legislator, the lieutenant governor, and a uniformed park staff who can issue tickets and who have training in conservation. And the CRD can't offer any of those.
And that act protects the old-growth forest and other things like that, that if it was downloaded to the CRD may not be. I mean, they may be, but they may not be protected.
Precisely. And it protects the park borders and what goes on with inside the park. And a CRD park, the borders can be changed by bureaucrats in one afternoon. To change a provincial park, it has to go through cabinet and the whole works.
So each election, you may be having a different set of rules apply to John Dean Park.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And now we have a petition, 2,000 signatures. The descendants of the 5 different people who brought the lands together, John Dean was the first person, and then 4 other people added lands in the 50s.
Oh.
Now, the Woodward's department store, Mrs. Russ, who is the descendant of that family, has written several letters protesting and reiterating her feelings against the proposed transfer as it was given to the people of the province. Okay. And the same with Sidney Pickles. His son, Norman Pickles, who lives in California, has also written similar letters. Okay. So we have the descendants, we have the First Nations, the Friends of John Dean, the petition, and we have virtually everybody who is saying, you know, let's keep it a provincial park.
Okay. Well, we're running out of time, so who can, if one of the viewers or any of the viewers want to protect or got on board, at the end of this program, we'll have your telephone number up for them to contact you.
Okay.
Is that, how else can they get involved?
Okay, well, they can phone me, and I can give them Mo Sahoda's address, and they can send a letter. I think that would be the most effective thing to do, is just write a couple of paragraphs to, or not Mo Sahoda, the new Environment Minister, the Ministry of Lands and Parks and Environment, just send that off. And if they want a copy of the book, then I could drive it to their house also, if they just give me their address. And,
all right, so they can get the book from you as well. Sure. Where else can they get it?
Okay, I sell it for $12, but if they want it through Tanner's, the Sydney Pharmacy, or the Log Cabin on the Sanch Fairgrounds, they're $14.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for coming.
It's been fun.
Yeah, and this is a very special book about a very special part of the peninsula. And make sure that you, next time you see it, you take a look and see what Jarrett's project has all been about. Thank you very much,
Thank
Jarrett.
you. Yeah.